Ever since the first humans looked toward the sky, we have dreamed of flight. And whenever we have looked upward, we have seen those birds that ruled the air when we were but a gleam in evolution's eye, the hawks. Today, the machines of man can carry him to the sky and beyond, but we cannot know the effortless mastery of the air that is the birthright of the hawks. Hawks are examples of nature's craftsmanship at its finest. The demands of their type of life, the need for speed and agility and power, have sculpted their forms to perfection. Hawk is a generalized term we use for a casually related company of birds of prey which hunt by day. The hawks are fundamentally different from and unrelated to the owls, night-flying hunters who depend largely on hearing. Vultures are often thought to be close relatives of the hawks, but genetic studies show that the New World vultures, like this turkey vulture, are actually related more closely to the storks. The term eagle is loosely applied to some of the larger hawks in various parts of the world, even though some of the eagles are not very closely related to one another, and some birds referred to as hawks may be larger. Unlike the eagles, the hawks are plentiful. Unlike the owls, the hawks are active by day, and we cannot help but see them.
So richly diverse is the North American web of life that it supports about 30 species of hawks, each with its unique combination of range, habitat, and lifestyle. Hi, I'm Michael Godfrey, your host, as we visit North America's hawks up close.
Most of our hawks fall into three groups: the buteos, the accipiters, or the falcons. Each group has a characteristic shape, reflecting the way the birds fly and the type of hunting they do. The buteos, like this red-tailed hawk migrating past Raccoon Ridge in New Jersey, are large birds with broad wings and short tails. We're likely to see them soaring over open country. One of the best ways to enjoy a long journey on the interstate highway is to watch for the redtails hunting from trees or poles. The roadside grasses are laced with the tunnels and runways of rodents. The rodents reproduce all year in many parts of the country, and their numbers constantly push them into the closely cropped road shoulders. A movement in the grasses a quarter-mile away sends the redtail to a higher vantage, and finally to launch on its long, deadly glide. In the past, the buteos were sometimes called chicken hawks, but the fact is that they rarely take chickens, nor any other birds. The buteo style of hunting is better suited to catching rats and mice. The buteos can soar for hours with little effort, or they may hunt from a perch, watching the ground with keen vision, waiting to drop on an unsuspecting rodent. The buteos rely on patience and surprise more than on speed. It's the buteos we see most in our travels and in our neighborhoods. This is the solitary figure hulking in the bare tree or on a roadside pole, a benign presence, a link with the biotic community around us. The buteos are the visible tip of the vast iceberg that is the North American life system. A few of the smaller buteos are more maneuverable than the redtail. The gray hawk, which lives along rivers in the southwest, routinely takes large, fast-running, and fast-climbing lizards, which it snatches from the high branches of trees. Far more maneuverable as a group, however, are the accipiters. These hawks have short, rounded wings and long tails, a design for flying with rapid twists and turns and with sudden bursts of speed through forests. Of the three accipiters in North America, the Cooper's hawk is the medium-sized one and the most widespread as a nesting bird in the lower 48 states. But by far, the sharp-shinned hawk is our most common accipiter. Accipiters have to be fast and agile because they prey upon other birds, often pursuing them through dense cover. Although the accipiters are impressively fast, the fastest flyers are the falcons. With long, pointed wings and long tails, falcons are streamlined for lightning dives in open country. They often drop on their prey with a swift power dive, sometimes from great height. Measuring the speed of such dives is difficult, but observers claim that a peregrine falcon in a dive can reach 200 miles per hour. Besides these three major groups, there are other types of hawks, all distinguished by the way they hunt and the prey they pursue. Several species of hawks are referred to as kites, and all of these have a very buoyant, sailing flight. The snail kite, for example, soars over marshes in Florida, watching for large snails, practically the only item on its menu. We might guess that birds of this type were named for the paper kites flown by children, but this would be backward. In fact, the paper kites were named after the birds. This Mississippi kite is shaped somewhat like a peregrine falcon, but its swooping, tumbling, aerobatic flight is for catching flying insects, which it eats on the wing. The Bosque del Apache National Wildlife Refuge sprawls across the bottomlands of the Rio Grande downstream from Albuquerque, New Mexico. Vast numbers of snow and Ross's geese winter in the fields and wetlands of the refuge. Where there is so much life, death must hover. The geese which succumb to the stresses of winter are fare for crows, even for eagles, both enthusiastic scavengers. Few of the hawks are known for scavenging, but hawks are nothing if not resourceful. The northern harrier, who normally eats only mice, frogs, and snakes of marshes and low fields, adapts to the bosque's bounty. Resentful crows, seeking to discourage competition, get a close look at the harrier's hardware. When not being heckled, the harrier quarters the open lowlands. It rests on the ground, occasionally taking so lofty a perch as a fence post. In hunting flight, the harrier skims the grasses, holding its wingtips aloft for clearance. So near the ground does the harrier hunt that it uses an owl-like facial disc to sort through the sounds close below. The relation to owls goes deeper still. The marshlands the harrier hunts by day are worked at night by the short-eared owl. The two keep a relentless pressure on the rodents, their hunts overlapping at the changing of the guard. Unlike the buteos, and most other hawks as well, harrier sexes wear different colors. Speculatively, the strong color contrast of males and females may be associated with another harrier trait which is unique among our hawks: polygamy. This male harrier may mate with several females. The obvious difference between the sexes may absolve him of the need to challenge every other harrier to sort out intruders from prospective mates. A brown visitor is always welcome. Most hawks hunt by sight alone, and this is true of the osprey, or fish hawk. The latter name tells it all, because the osprey feeds almost exclusively on fish. Hovering or gliding over the water, or watching from a high branch, the osprey waits until it spots a fish near the surface, and then makes a mighty plunge dive to grab the fish in its talons. For most hawks, as for most predators, hunting is a solitary activity. But the Harris's hawk, found in the southwestern U.S. and in many tropical areas, often lives in family groups year-round. These groups may cooperate to flush and catch prey. In Arizona, birding tour guide Rick Taylor explains the cooperative hunting of Harris's hawk.
I find the Harris hawks of particular interest because they cooperatively hunt. They're certainly beautiful hawks, but to watch 2 or 3 or up to a half a dozen at a time pursue a jackrabbit across a desert valley is one of the most moving sensations available to a bird watcher that we have in southeastern Arizona. Many hawks migrate in great number. Mixed flocks are fairly frequent at a wide variety of locations around the United States. But Harris hawks are the only species that we have which is sociable, meaning that often 2 or 3 birds will be found perching adjacent to one another very companionably. Apparently, this serves an ecological function as well.
Superb powers of flight are only part of the reason hawks are such effective predators. They have other physical adaptations that are equally impressive. The term hawkeye is synonymous with keen vision. Most birds have better eyesight than humans do, but the eyes of hawks are sharp almost beyond belief. A red-tail can see newsprint farther away than we can read the headlines. The retina of this ferruginous hawk's eye, like that of a human eye, is covered with tiny receptor cells called rods and cones. But in the hawk, these structures are so densely packed that the bird can see far more detail than we can. If we look at a distant tree, for example, we may see it only as a blur of branches, but a hawk may be able to make out each individual twig, and perhaps a squirrel hiding among them. In addition to seeing this fine detail, the eyes of hawks are actually capable of a sort of telescopic vision. Each eye is slightly elongated, like the tube of a short telescope, so that the image falling on the retina is somewhat magnified. Hawks do the actual catching of their prey with their powerful talons. Each of the 3 forward-facing toes and the 1 rearward is armed with a nail which arcs through more than 90 degrees. It's the impalement of the prey which serves to shock and immobilize. The piercing power is immense because it is driven by 3 combined forces. First, there's the tremendous inertia of the hurtling raptor. Then, in the split second before impact, the feet, which have been drawn back like cocked fists, are thrust forward in a striking motion. And finally, there's the closing force within the foot as the legs flex upward under impact. The most obvious weapon on a hawk is its long, hooked bill. It is used principally to tear pieces from prey already killed by the talons. This gyrfalcon shows the notch near the tip of the bill characteristic of falcons. When a falcon is dealing with struggling prey, the victim is dispatched with a quick bite to the spinal cord at the base of the neck. The notch in the bill is well fitted to this task. The administration of the coup de grace by cervical bite is actually common practice among other types of hawks as well as the falcons. If we watch carefully, we begin to appreciate that being a hawk, in spite of the deadly hardware, is not necessarily easy. Pierced by the red-tail's inch-long talons, the rat is wounded, but still dangerous. It sees an opening, an instant's carelessness, and sinks its teeth into the hawk's foot. the hawk regains control and severs the spinal column just behind the head. Given the red-tail's power and determination, the result of this contest was never much in doubt. Yet it's no leap of imagination to see that a lifetime of such desperate combat must take its toll. Each rat carried into the woods for dinner is a meal well earned. How is it possible for 30 different kinds of hawks to coexist in North America? This continent has so many different habitats, and each hawk has its own habitat preference. Swainson's hawk, a buteo of the central and western states, was formerly a bird of the prairies and desert grasslands. It's still found there, but it has adapted to farmland as well. This buteo takes a variety of prey and specializes in large insects. Swainson's hawks may follow farm equipment, watching for insects or small rodents flushed by the machinery. Another western buteo of open country is the ferruginous hawk. Larger than Swainson's, it often lives in drier, rougher country. One thing the ferruginous and Swainson's hawks have in common is that each has a dark form. Some individuals are dark brown or almost black, where so-called normal birds are much paler. This dark morph ferruginous hawk leaves its perch to hunt the Sonoran Desert foothills of Arizona's Chiricahua Mountains. The trend to dark plumage seems to be common among buteos in the West for reasons the birds have yet to reveal. In eastern North America, almost all the red-tailed hawks are whitish below. This dark morph red-tail soars in the Dragoon Mountains in Arizona. In the west, many of the red-tails are dark reddish-brown, chocolate brown, or black. A very dark type of red-tail nesting in Alaska for many years was given its own name, Harlan's hawk. For dark western hawks in spectacular settings, few places can rival Aravaipa Canyon in south-central Arizona. The center of this canyon has been designated a wilderness area, and the rare desert bighorn sheep still roams the high, rocky walls. Aravaipa is the summer home of two specialty hawks of the Southwest, the zone-tailed hawk and the common black hawk. The zone-tail is a typical buteo. Soaring at a distance, it can look surprisingly similar to the turkey vulture, enough so to fool many a bird watcher at first glance. This resemblance may fool its prey as well. Animals like ground squirrels in the Southwest learn not to be afraid of the passing turkey vulture, a common and harmless carrion eater. When a zone-tailed hawk flies over, looking like a turkey vulture, the small animals may not notice the difference until too late. Zone-tailed hawks are uncommon throughout their wide range in the tropics, and probably fewer than 100 pairs nest in the U.S. Remote and protected, Aravaipa Canyon is a perfect situation for them. They nest in the large cottonwoods along Aravaipa Creek and hunt over the surrounding desert scrub. More of a riparian specialist is the common black hawk. It nests along Aravaipa Creek. It also does its hunting there. This bird is a long-legged, heavy-bodied relative of the buteos, and it captures most of its prey at the water's edge or in the water. Frogs, small fish, and snakes. The black hawk is a rare bird in the United States, and Aravaipa is one of its strongholds here. Ornithologist J. Schnell has devoted more than a decade to studying the blackhawks in Aravaipa Canyon.
The blackhawks are primarily in Aravaipa Canyon because of the riparian habitat. They are obligate riparian nesters. They have to nest in riparian in the southwest. If they nested in cliffs, there'd be no problem in their conservation, but since they are limited to riparian and the food in the riparian habitat, there is a problem with their conservation. So the blackhawks are being mainly dependent on fish and frogs. You'd think they'd be in real trouble, but even when the fish and the frogs have been low, they seem to switch to other prey items. They are generalists in their feeding habits, so whatever is abundant, they seem to zero in on, and if there's enough energy, food energy in that population, they're able to raise it and successfully carry through their nesting cycle.
Zoologists tell us that northerly life systems are simplified relative to their southern counterparts. There are fewer species in the north. But the ones that are there tend to be large. As the polar bear is the world's largest bear, so is the gyrfalcon the largest falcon. Erratically in winter, this massive falcon of the Arctic's icy cliffs and tundras casually calls on the northern United States. Visitation from the south is more common. In the rainforests of Costa Rica, this semi-plumbeous hawk has captured a basiliscus lizard. This is one of the numerous hawks unique to South and Central America, where it will live out its life well to the south of the Rio Grande. But a few of these Latin American raptors just reached the southern borders of the United States. One of these is the short-tailed hawk, a crow-sized buteo found all over the American tropics and locally in the peninsula of Florida, where it is now protected in the Everglades National Park. The much larger white-tailed hawk commands a vast domain beginning in Argentina and ranging all the way to the prairies of southern Texas, where it is a reliable element of the electroscape. Another visitor from the south is the roadside hawk. Common from Mexico to South America, and often, as its name suggests, found along roadsides, it has turned up in the United States in extreme southern Texas. The gray hawk is another Central American raptor whose homeland just touches ours in southern Arizona. By far the most common of the tropical hawks in the U.S. is the black-shouldered kite, steadily gaining ground as a North American breeder. Its floating kite-like grace, punctuated with hovers and plunges into the brush, is becoming a more common sight from California to Florida. One of the strangest of the tropical hawks to cross the border is the crested caracara, national bird of Mexico. Although it is shaped somewhat like a buteo, the caracara is actually a member of the falcon family. Its feeding habits are unlike those of typical falcons or of typical hawks, because it feeds on carrion, often joining the vultures feasting on roadkills. Its companion on this West Texas fence is a scissor-tailed flycatcher, courteously escorting the caracara through its territory. The southerly raptors are not really ambassadors from Latin political realms, but from life systems which transcend and unite the Americas. To gain this intimacy, this pair of red-shouldered hawks spent weeks in elaborate rituals of courtship. Since they don't sing to advertise their territories as songbirds do, the hawks often take to the air to perform display flights, dancing in the sky. The graceful swallow-tailed kite is one of many species of hawks that have developed flight displays to advertise their territorial claims and to court their mates. Even the snail kite, rare and endangered in the U.S., has a special flight gesture for wooing and bonding.
As a study in courage, I'd offer this experience with the red-shouldered hawk, a 2-pound buteo of the streamside hardwoods. To film a red-shouldered hawk nest near my home, I had to haul the equipment 40 feet up a nearby tree. I always tried to make the climbs when the adults were away. One morning I miscalculate and find myself at eye level with the female. Normally she'd have flown, but today her chicks are hatching and they need her warmth. Hackles raised, she stands her ground a few feet from what must be the equivalent of a dragon. Watching this brave huntress raise her family was unforgettable.
Where trees are scarce, as in Arctic or desert regions, hawks may nest on cliffs, in low bushes, or even on flat ground. But over most of North America, a typical hawk nest may be a renovation of an old nest of a crow or squirrel, a bulky platform of sticks high in a tree. The male often chooses the site. This female Cooper's hawk in Cave Creek Canyon, Arizona, incubates on a nest she may reuse for many years. Settled in, she becomes invisible to the passing observer. The Cooper's hawk's larger cousin, the northern goshawk, has another way of dealing with visitors. These birds will fearlessly attack anyone who comes too close. This behavior is provoked only by a perceived threat to the nest. Female hawks tend to be larger than males, sometimes noticeably larger. One possible explanation is that the distinctly smaller male may focus on smaller prey. This way, the members of a mated pair will not be competing with each other for food and may broaden their feeding opportunities. The hawks that show the most obvious size difference between males and females are those, like the accipiters and the larger falcons, that feed on birds or other agile prey. In these hawks, the female does most of the incubating and the early brooding of the young. During this period, the male provides the food for the female and the young. Since the larger prey is usually less numerous, it may be an advantage for the male to be smaller so that he can bring back more small meals instead of fewer large ones. It is a common practice in many types of hawks for the male to present the food to the female away from the nest. This male Cooper's hawk patiently guards his catch near the nest for more than an hour while the female hunts. Hearing her approaching voice, he leaves the offering at the appointed place of exchange. In North America, there is only one hawk that raises its young in holes in trees, the American kestrel. This little falcon feeds on smaller prey than its relatives, and its hunting is less spectacular. Often it hovers over open fields before dropping to pick up a grasshopper, perhaps a mouse. The kestrel has become scarce in some parts of the United States because of a lack of good nesting sites. A scarcity of dead trees besets cavity nesting wildlife just about everywhere, and competition for nest holes can be intense. Fortunately, kestrels readily accept man-made nesting boxes of the right dimensions. People have put out kestrel boxes with impressive results, increasing the populations of these colorful falcons in regions where they had almost disappeared. A kestrel box must have a floor area of at least 8 inches by 8 inches. An entrance hole 3 inches in diameter should be centered 10 to 12 inches above the floor. The box should be about 15 feet above the ground, in the open, with plenty of open space in front of the entrance. North of Traverse City, Michigan, wildlife photographer Rick Bateson has combined conservation with research, learning more about the kestrel while providing it with nesting sites. When the young birds are large enough, Rick bands them with a Fish and Wildlife Service metal band so that each bird can be identified if encountered later. The parent kestrels watch from a distance. But when Bateson is finished with the banding process, they return to feed their young. The kestrel is one of our smallest hawks, but humans are also helping to provide nesting sites for one of our largest, the osprey, or fish hawk. This aerial angler is adaptable enough to make its living on salt water or fresh water, but good natural nest locations are at a premium. On the island of Martha's Vineyard, Gus Ben-David of the Massachusetts Audubon Society and others have set up more than 100 osprey poles. As a result, the vineyard now has a thriving population of these birds. Similar projects in many parts of America have been important in helping the osprey return from the edge of extinction.
Just snug it up.
Tell us when, Michael, we'll start shoveling some dirt.
Shovel some dirt.
All right, go, guys. Pack, pant.
Hey, this is hard.
All right, you pull it back up just a little bit. Pull your tamp up. Pull your tamp up. Let the dirt fall down.
Just a generation ago, the osprey, along with our national emblem, the bald eagle, was nearly wiped off the face of North America. The problem it faced then was more subtle and serious than a shortage of nesting sites. Persistent hydrocarbon pesticides, like DDT, were being used in huge amounts for insect control. These poisons remained lethal long after their job was done. When songbirds or frogs or fish ate the poisoned insects, the DDT was passed along and concentrated. Then it was concentrated even more in the predators that ate them. Many predators at the top of the food chain carried heavy concentrations of DDT, and although the poison usually did not kill them outright, it often ruined their efforts to reproduce. Populations of ospreys, bald eagles, and peregrine falcons withered under the relentless poisoning. Thanks to the efforts of the National Audubon Society and other groups, the use of DDT in the United States was finally outlawed in 1972. Several kinds of hawks and fish-eating birds, like the osprey and the brown pelican, have shown strong recovery since then. In the U.S., mankind's relationship with the hawks is improving. We've stopped poisoning them with pesticides. We have also outlawed the shooting of hawks, an amusement that all too recently passed for sport. The most serious damage was done by shooting hawks where they concentrate in large numbers. Most hawks are solitary by nature, but every spring and fall, when they migrate between their summer and winter ranges, their favored routes of travel often concentrate them in narrow corridors. Along some mountain ridges, along the seacoast, and along certain parts of the Great Lakes, hundreds or even thousands of hawks may pass by on some days. One of the most infamous spots for hawk shooting in the eastern United States was Hawk Mountain, Pennsylvania. In the early part of the 20th century, gunners would come to the mountain, sometimes hundreds at a time, every weekend in fall. The toll of hawks slaughtered each season ran into the thousands. But all that has changed. The infamous Hawk Mountain is now the famous Hawk Mountain Sanctuary. People still come here by the hundreds throughout the autumn, but now they come armed with binoculars and telescopes. not with shotguns. Many lovers of birds of prey consider the annual trip to Hawk Mountain to be a pilgrimage. They come from all parts of the United States and from all parts of the world to watch as the southbound raptors troop the fall colors.
Just a little bit above eye level. We're located on the Kittatinny Ridge, which is 1,500 feet above the river. But what it represents is the last ridge south in this great Appalachian chain of mountains. So the birds are coming down here ridge over ridge, and they hit this last ridge, and instead of flying across it and over the Great Valley, which expends a great amount of energy, they stick to the ridge system to get these updrafts on one side, depending on the wind. If it's northwest wind, they use the updrafts, and also the thermal currents, which block up against the south side of this ridge during the same fall period. So they're adhering to the ridge system because innately it's a conservation of energy. They don't have to fly great distances south without wind currents. And what happens here at Hawk Mountain topographically is this north lookout juts out into the valley from the main ridge system, and so the hawks are funneled into this area. So it provides this window on this great migration that's coming down out of the northeast. It's a quality spot, being able to look at eye level at a bird or down or way up, and then combined with the great excitement that it brings when all the people are here coming from all over the world to view this spectacle. I don't think you can find this anywhere else. I've been at all the major lookouts in North America and in Israel and Greece and Spain. This is the spot. Look at it.
They're really getting up there.
Oh, that one.
To get from mindless persecution of our raptors to annual celebrations of their southing, we had to go through an educational process. That began with pioneers like Rosalie Edge, who defied the gunners at Hawk Mountain in the 1930s and secured the mountain as a sanctuary.
You'll know what it is.
The work of education continues. Walter Crawford, director of the World Bird Sanctuary in St. Louis, shares the raptors with a group of students.
Birds that are found here, but how they all interrelate in a family that's found throughout the United States. Thank you very much, Katie.
His colleague, Melinda Angstrom, reaches out to the very young in a landmark program called Wings for Tots. The goal is ambitious. Give every child in the St. Louis school system an understanding of the critical importance of birds of prey. The rehabilitation of injured birds of prey is also a major concern at the World Bird Sanctuary. This male sharp-shinned hawk was brought to the sanctuary having been found near starvation. Nursed and nourished by trained and licensed handlers, the sharpshin is ready to return to the wild. Sharp-shinned hawks are numerous migrants along the eastern ridges. The sharpshin is the smallest of our three accipiters, and it's one of the principal beneficiaries of the tremendous popularity of bird feeding in America today, for the sharpshin specializes in small birds. The sharpshin is the reason every bird feeder must have cover nearby. But it is the unbelievable numbers of passing broad-winged hawks that bring the faithful year after year to Hawk Mountain. Peak numbers of this small woodland buteo are variable and unpredictable, yet they rarely fail to reward the Hawk Mountain pilgrim who arrives on the right day to see their billowing formations. Most of the watchers come here for sheer enjoyment, But there is a purposeful side to the observations. Every fall, the staff at the Hawk Mountain Sanctuary keeps a careful tally, meticulously counting the hawks that pass the lookouts. The numbers fluctuate from year to year, since minor weather patterns can shift the routes taken by some hawks. But over the long run, these counts provide a way to monitor the populations of many raptors, and by inference, the health of the North American life scheme.
All those birds go back. There's one up there.
When we get to pinnacle. I've never seen enough so close.
Okay. I guess you're pretty busy, but I'll give you the count for the hour if you have a moment. We had one northern harrier, 22 sharpshins, and 735 broadwings for the hour.
There's the osprey. That's him on site.
Hawk Mountain and other sites on the eastern ridges like the New Jersey Audubon Society's Raccoon Ridge are especially favored by soaring birds like buteos, seeking an easy ride on the updrafts. Accipiters and falcons are power flyers, not easy gliders, and their biggest flights can be seen where they concentrate along coastlines on their way south. The dedicated hawk watcher could begin October at Martha's Vineyard, perhaps finding a young peregrine resting on a seaside cliff. The bird and the rock it is perched on both came from far to the north, the peregrine on the winds, and the rock in the belly of a glacier whose outwash remains formed the island. Over the vineyard's timeless coastal heaths, young peregrines in passage practice life in the fast lane, chasing each other and the small birds which fuel the stunning falcon migrations of the eastern seaboard. With due regard for Jim Brett's well-founded enthusiasms for Hawk Mountain, Cape May at the southern tip of New Jersey is another world-class spot for watching hawk migrations. In early October, when the weather cooperates, hundreds of accipiters and scores of falcons may pass the Hawk Watch platform at Cape May Point.
It was here. Cape May.
One follower of the migrations is New Jersey Audubon Society staff hawk watcher Mary Gustafson, jubilant on a record-setting day in 1988.
I hope that one's worthy of 125, Frank. That's an awful pretty peregrine.
Monarch butterflies, bound for Mexico, often concentrate near the tip of Cape May Point. So do certain dragonflies, like the green darner, which is also migratory. On a good flight day, these migrations converge, windowing North America's ecology on the wing. Our medium-sized falcon in North America is the merlin, once called the pigeon hawk because it takes prey up to the size of pigeons. Passing the observation deck at Cape May Point, a merlin draws applause with a fine catch of a dragonfly.
Whoa, got one. Black and white banded tail. And
That's a merlin, right?
that's a merlin.
The peregrine, star of the show at Cape May, is a widespread but uncommon bird that lives in wild places on 6 continents. Peregrines nest on the ledges of tall buildings in New York, Chicago, Toronto, and other cities, hunting pigeons high above the streets and ranging over the surrounding country. The best vantages for watching southbound hawks in autumn are on or near the eastern seaboard. Martha's Vineyard, Raccoon Ridge, Hawk Mountain, Cape May, Assateague Island on the Maryland coast, Pea Island on North Carolina's Outer Banks, all the way south to the last of the Atlantic Barrier Islands, Cumberland Island. There are also some vantages in the Rockies for watching the fall passage of western raptors, particularly in the Sandia Range near Albuquerque. But for the northbound movements in spring, Whitefish Point on the north shore of Michigan's Upper Peninsula has a special mystique. Songs memorial to the brave mariners of the Great Lakes say that Superior doesn't easily relinquish her dead. She likes to keep her ice as well, and if spring is late, the migrant hawks, like the great ships, face a tough passage. But the hawks come to Whitefish Point determined to make a crossing. Rough-legged hawks in all plumages, dark and light, young and old, work their way toward their tundra nesting range. Out of an April squall, a young goshawk passes the observatory headquarters to brave her first northbound crossing of Lake Superior. We're undergoing a revolution today in our understanding and our stewardship of the North American life system. Our changing attitude toward the hawks reflects that new vision. The hawks may be changing their attitude toward us in response. Arizona's Sulphur Springs Valley, east of Tucson, is a wintering mecca for hawks and for hawk watchers. The prairie falcon is an uncommon falcon of the arid western grasslands, a generalist whose tastes run toward rodents and small birds. We find one on a utility pole, but the bird is wary and it flies before we get a good look. Hours later we return. The falcon has made a kill, a success which does not pass the notice of a nearby red-tailed hawk. Each time the prairie falcon flees with the kill, the red-tail inspects the vacated perch for scraps, then gives chase. In our excitement to follow the drama, we find ourselves between the two birds. The same bird who could not countenance our presence earlier permits us close approach as she dines. The falcon now considers us not only tolerable, but useful, a deterrent to the frustrated pirate on the next pole.